Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
James, welcome to Lawyers Who Learn. It's really great to have you on. You've been on a faculty member for Lawline for a long time, and you did 2 episodes with Lawyers Who Lead with Sigal. So this is your 3rd time appearing on a Lawline podcast.
Well, they say 3rd time's a charm, so hopefully this one will go well.
I hope so. Sigal is a big act to follow. She asks some really compelling questions. You tell a really good story, and it's good to catch up to see where we're at. What I'm going to do, if it's okay, I'm just going to read essentially your bio really quick, or just what you said in the podcast, so we don't necessarily have to go through it every detail, but we'll see where we end up. So you were an engineer originally turned patent attorney, and you ended up working for the patent office. And then from there, I guess to skip ahead, you ended up going into blockchain and Bitcoin and Ethereum in 2014. You really focused on that. And to skip further ahead, right now you run the AI group at Sheppard Mullin. And I think you said there's 100 attorneys that are focused in that area, at least last in
I saw. Over 100, yeah, it's probably up to about 120.
Which blew my mind. So I'm sure I missed a lot, but is that the basic framework?
Yeah, those are some of the basic elements. Yeah, for sure.
So this is about learning and growth. And before I even go into your background and your bio, and you speak a lot, you've obviously done a lot of lectures and spoken to Sigal a lot. Is there any questions that you wish somebody asked you in an interview or a podcast that relate to your journey or your growth or how you've learned, or anything in regards to being a lawyer that you wish you could talk about more and you never really have a chance to?
I think I looked at some of the questions on how you approach this. I think there's a lot of good questions there. I think there's not really one single question. There's not just one single way to succeed. I think there's multiple facets to it. And I think that there's different questions that kind of get to those different facets. I don't know if that's an answer or not, but there's not really one question that comes to mind.
Okay, so for me, there's a couple areas that I think are really unique and interesting that I'm thinking about the attorney who's watching this and can learn. Certainly the area that you're in is fascinating, and the journey that you got to be here is interesting. So let's start with one of the quotes that you said with Sigal that I really love in you. And you said, you give a lot of quick answers. But what people don't understand is to give those quick answers, it takes hours and hours of reading and speaking to experts in the industry and going to conference to be able to give those quick answers. And so let's start with the learning component, because things have changed so quickly since blockchain to where things have gone with AI. So let's go through that journey of how you do, just take us through what your life is like now in terms of how you've learned so much to some degree, but I feel like you had to start all over.
Yeah, I would say it's not so much start all over, but it's continue to build on everything, right? So I've done AI work for 20 years and I know a lot, but I learn something new every day because it's changing so rapidly, both the technology, the business applications, and the legal issues. So I really think that one of the key things is that to be really good or succeed at any career, you really have to keep learning, right? Lifelong learning, and it just requires commitment. And you ask, what's my active day like? I read a lot, listen to a lot of podcasts, audible books, and a lot of times when people are chilling out, listening to music, I'm listening to a podcast or a book. Whether I'm walking, go through an airport, or whenever there's free time, I try to make use of it to capture what I can.
You have any books near you now?
I have a bunch of mostly audible books. They're on my phone. I could take a peek, but I can rattle off a couple.
It's worth the effort. I would love to know if it's okay, what you're listening to on Audible right now.
Yeah, so some of the books I've listened to recently that were amazing, especially in the AI field. One is called How to Create a Mind by Ray Kurzweil. It really is a fascinating look at how in the last decade or so, as humans, we've really studied and tried to understand how our mind works, in part to try to build neural networks, AI machines that kind of replicate it to create thinking machines. That was...
Before we move on to the next one, Ray Kurzweil Well, I first was turned on to him from the book, I think it was called The Spiritual Machines, and he talks about oh my God, this is where your
The
moment, what is it?
singularity. Yep.
So, and I don't know if you read that book too. The singularity is essentially when machine and man combine. One thing that was so fascinating about that book when he talked about evolution and he talked about Moore's law and how things double every 18 months, what he
Yep.
said was building technology and building machines is part of evolution because it can't evolve naturally fast enough. And so when I read this as a decade plus ago, AI, of course, has been around for a while, but it wasn't to where it is right now. When you think of the singularity and you think about Gen AI and you think about where things are going, I don't know, where does your mind go?
I think when you certainly, a lot of people debate whether AI is really intelligent or it can only do what it's programmed to do. And I firmly believe already it's intelligent. I wouldn't say it's gotten to the point of full artificial general intelligence. It's still working towards that. Um, that's a philosophical debate, but I think I think all of that is fascinating, but what's even more fascinating to me is when you look at the interface of humans and machines and look at how that's evolving. And even just recently with like Neuralink, where they're implanting stuff in a human brain to help people hear who couldn't hear or see who couldn't see. But taking that to the next step, literally people are talking about the ability to literally have a neural link where you can just download stuff directly to your brain. And so those are just some examples. There's others like smart prosthetics where there's really AI driven prosthetics that enable people to do stuff that most humans can't. And so look at all that together and you look at some point, where do humans end and machines begin, or machines end and humans begin? That confluence, I think, is just really mind blowing.
It seems inevitable, right? Like that Neuralink will be to some degree or some version of that in all future humans.
Whether it's
Agreed?
all or a good chunk, or maybe it's all, who knows?
A good
But
chunk,
yeah,
but it'll be common.
yeah,
So
I think so.
you agree, correct?
Yeah.
So what, just out of curiosity, we'll go back to the books in a second. Where does the law come into play here? There's no law. What are some things that you're thinking about in this area? Do you represent any companies that do certain things like this that the laws haven't even been written of what's going to happen or how these are? Obviously, there's a lot of privacy and other areas to that concern, but where does your mind go?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot. I have one client that I do some work that does a lot with the brain, but it's not like Neuralink. It's more leveraging the neuroplasticity of the brain to actually measure how people perform with certain skills. And they compare like your performance and which regions of the brain fire and which of the brain waves fire to what degree when you're doing a task compared to how an expert does it. And then there's mental exercises to try to get you to be more proficient like the expert by measuring all the brain stuff. So that's actually pretty fascinating in and of itself, even before you start implanting stuff into people's brains. Yeah, there's definitely some privacy issues. There's definitely some safety issues. Just putting stuff in people's body, you're going to deal with medical and health and FDA potential issues as well. And depending on what happens with that, if you're just, let's say, downloading something to someone's brain, is there any negative effect on it, or is it just giving them information, or are you reading anything out? Are you reading the brain waves and learning what people are thinking and not disclosing that? Right? There's definitely some issues like that could be at stake.
One of the things, again, in Ray Kurzweil's book is about downloading your mind, right, into
Mm-hmm.
a hard drive, and can you exist after you die in a different form through the neural connections? And what's so interesting to me is when they talk about AI and how it's evolving, what I understand, and you probably understand this better to me, many times the answer is we're not exactly sure how it's doing that. We know it's taking numbers and patterns and doing that, but what it's doing right here, we can't fully explain it. First of all, am I understanding that correctly?
To a large extent, yeah, it's the black box problem. A lot of people
Say
are,
that again. What problem?
black box problem. So
Okay.
you have inputs, you know what you're training something on, and you know what the outputs are, right? I mean, that's where some of the lack of explainability or transparency can arise. Now, there's different ways to train models, and people can set a lot of the parameters, but I think there is some difficulty perhaps in knowing fully exactly what's happening. And I think that's really one of the things that distinguishes AI from machine learning or like predictive analytics or some of this stuff where you mentioned like AI is not new. It was invented in the 50s. And a lot of the early things that were called AI were really actually expert systems. And what
Yeah.
those were systems where you'd have an expert in a domain would map out all the questions, all the answers with these decision trees, and you would input stuff and the machine would output great answers, but it was just reading what it was programmed to do. And it looked like it was smart, but it wasn't really adaptive and it couldn't handle things it
Exactly.
wasn't programmed to do. And the difference with generative AI is it creates new content, right? It's not limited by what it was programmed to do. And so there's where you start getting unpredictability, where you could get bias, where you can get false results, where you can get a lot of other things that are unanticipated and not wanted because you can't vet every output before it's generated.
Yeah. No, and that's where the mix of different ingredients to create generative AI, to create something that exists that wasn't born. And it's almost like I see like we're working on it and you're like, you can see sparks every so often. And that's why I just wonder if we could figure if that happens, is it possible to essentially download your mind to a machine at some point? Do you think that's ever going to happen?
I do think that's feasible. There are a number of people who have built applications, maybe don't go quite that far yet, but they'll capture your voice and a lot of information about your life. And some of it is designed to enable grandchildren to really interact with their grandparents even after they're dead. And some people think that's weird and don't want that. Some people think it's awesome to be able to read. So again, the early versions of that are just taking voice and that. But if you can download the mind and actually ask questions to someone who's deceased, a family member, and get an accurate answer as to what they would say, that would be pretty powerful. I don't know we're quite there yet, but I don't think it's technically infeasible to do at some point.
And as I told you early on, I was experimenting with a new camera. That camera turned off. Now I'm on my old computer camera, but I got to roll with the punches. I guess we pissed off the AI gods. So, okay. So I appreciate that. If we could, do you mind going back to your book list? Because that led to discussion. Let's see what else you have on Audible that we can learn from.
Yeah, that was one. There's a whole bunch of AI books that I think are really good. And I hate to just pick a couple
Keep going.
because I'll be leaving out a lot.
No, I would love to just learn, even if it's just writing the list down so other people know what to read.
Yeah, there's a book called The Fourth Age, which takes a look at historical developments and looks forward a little bit about where we are and where we're going with AI. A Thousand Brains, which is part of the Thousand Brains project, has some really fascinating insights on different aspects of AI.
Let me ask you this. I start a lot of books that I can't finish because they should be like a paragraph. They should be an essay or a couple of pages and they're 400 and I just can't get through it, or just life gets hold. Are you finishing all these books, or you're starting a lot of books and you're starting like 6 books at once and sometimes you get through it?
No, I'm pretty much a serial listener. I try to listen to one at a time and I try to get through it. Unless I'm into it and I'm like, there's a few books I just won't finish because I feel like I'm not getting any value out of it, or it's a lot of regurgitation or whatever. But I don't know. I try to select the books based on things that other people have read and think are valuable, whose opinions I respect, and we share a lot of this information. And so most of the books that I pick up, I do finish.
What speed?
1.25.
Do you read anything on other areas besides AI, like self-help, self-improvement, leadership, or are you past that stage in your career?
Yeah, no, I definitely do some of that. I think there's always more to learn there. There was a phase of my life where I did a lot more of that. I tend to be more AI and blockchain and kind of really what I focus on is I try to find the intersection of business law and technology, because innovative business models or innovative technologies are going to create new legal issues, IP, regulatory, and new deals, new transactions, and all that kind of stuff. And as part of what I try to focus on is staying ahead of the curve with respect to the tech trends and business trends, and then try to figure out early what the legal implications are going to be. And that's a big part of where I focus my practice. As you mentioned earlier, some of the different areas I practice, they seem pretty disparate, but really what it is I focus on emerging technologies and business models. And I've just developed a knack for learning those, analyzing the issues, and being out in front on that.
Certainly an exciting space to be in. If you're in law, like there's just so much there. So what what is, because again, I'm trying to go to the learning path right now.
Yep.
And as a part, and I'm also interested in learning about some of the what it's like to be a partner at an AmLaw 100 firm and manage 120 other attorneys. So I'm curious, can you take us through like how you've learned, what you've learned in that process, or what it's like to build that practice group? I assume at some point when you first started it, it was just nobody, and then you built it
Yeah.
up. So I would love to, if you could share that journey for others who are aspiring to do what you've done.
Yeah, so I've done this with different practices. I started and still co-lead our blockchain and fintech team. I've done it with AI, and I've done it with other practices in other firms prior to this one. And really, I think for the teams that I do, it's really identifying a new area where we think there's growth opportunities and there's going to be a lot of different legal issues. And so the teams that I lead they're kind of industry teams as opposed to practice teams. So it's not just one legal area. It's really more AI touches on every industry and pretty much every area of law. And identifying the opportunity is the first thing, and then convincing the firm that we should commit resources to building a team around it. And that wasn't that hard in this space. The second thing is getting other willing volunteers to jump on board. And part of what we do with the teams is we do at least a monthly meeting. We do a lot of internal education, a lot of discussion among ourselves in particular areas, like what are the different legal issues and how do we leverage our knowledge to help clients? How do we, in areas like this, unlike some other areas of law, clients don't know what they don't know. They need to understand what the issues are. And so we do a lot of internal client education. We do collaboration among ourselves to teach ourselves. And we look for a way to connect dots that maybe people haven't connected before. In a particular industry or particular application, we try to map out what are the different legal issues, and then we try to get people with those different legal backgrounds to focus on that issue. We do stuff collaboratively, whether we're doing papers or doing presentations to clients or doing actual client work. And so it really just takes a group effort of people who are willing to be collaborative. And in a lot of firms that exist, in some firms it's more sharp elbowed and it's really hard to get true teamwork.
So when you identified it, was it in 2014 where you identified blockchain, Bitcoin when did you identify this group for Sheppard Mullin?
So I actually started doing blockchain work back in 2012. One of my clients was general counsel of the Bitcoin Foundation back then. And so I'd done some work. I didn't join Sheppard until 2015. So it was shortly after that I discussed creating a blockchain team around that.
And were you at a partner at another firm at that time?
Yes. Before that, yeah.
Got it. And just out of curiosity, was there, and feel free not to answer if that, I'm just curious because I hear that why partners move, why they laterally move. Is there a reason, like, because in careers, there's growth paths, right? And sometimes you hit a stage where you're like, okay, I don't see the next stage of growth for me at this firm, or I'm not learning enough, or I want to move locations, or they just offer me a better opportunity. What is the general reason why partners do these?
I think it's very personal and very different. Just without going into too much detail, where I was, it wasn't that I had created actually a blockchain team at my prior firm. It was more issues with the firm. They had done a merger and there was just a lot of instability over continued years. And so for me personally, it just became not a conducive environment to continue to grow because of what was going on in the firm.
Totally makes sense. So you come on, and did you know right away that you were going to start this team, or it's something you just proposed to them because you saw the opportunity?
In my mind, I wanted to do it. I wanted to get into the firm, get established, and kind of get up and running. But it was not too long after that I launched the concept.
And forgive me if these are obvious questions, but obviously I don't practice at an AmLaw 100 firm. When you have a team and you build it up and you say there's 120 people in it, are they potentially part of a lot of teams and this is just one team? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so a great question. So our firm, and I think a number of other firms now do the same, but so there's typically like legal practice groups, right? So I'm actually in the IP group because that's historically I've done a lot of IP work, although I do a lot more than that. And so for administrative purposes, I'm in the IP group, right? And so everyone's in a legal practice group. And then the industry teams like blockchain and AI, are a collection of people with different legal backgrounds that focus on those topics. So AI or blockchain or whatever the other teams might be. That's in short how it is administered. And so it's really more of a collaborative, it's more, there's internal education, but it's client facing activities like identifying opportunities, pitching clients together, training clients together, and doing those different things where you require multiple legal skill sets for a particular set of issues.
So just make sure I understood. So there's a practice group like IP.
Yep.
And then there's a team that can interact with several practice groups potentially, or no?
So there'll be a team that has members from different practice groups.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
Yeah. So like we have
It's
IT
like a
people,
cross-functional
we have
team.
Cross-functional, exactly. Is a good way to describe it.
Got it. And is the purpose of the team internal organization? Is there, I don't want to call it marketing. Say again?
Part of it is marketing. Part of it is marketing. Part of it
Okay.
is conveying. Like a lot of, I joke, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way to lawyers. A lot of lawyers did one type of legal work and they do it all their career because they're comfortable with it, they're good at it, and they just like to stay in their lane because of the comfort factor. A lot of the people that are on these teams are like, you need to cross-pollinate with other people doing different legal things than you're doing. And you got to learn a little bit about it to be able to intelligently talk to clients. Like I know a little about a lot. There's certain areas I know a lot about. If I go in and talk to a client and they're talking about AI, I can identify a lot of the issues they have. I'm not going to be the one who's going to solve all the issues. That's where the team comes in. So if the more people we have that are educated enough to have intelligent conversations with clients and say, here's the issues you need to think about, and if an issue comes up you can't answer, you say, I know who can answer these questions for you. It's on our team. It's not, oh, we'll see if we have somebody. We know who can do what.
Got it. So let's say I'm at Sheppard Mullin and I'm like, oh man, I like that team. That's a cool team. I think I could add value. Can I like raise my hand, reach out to you and say, James, here's the value that I can bring to the team. Let me join? Or is it not that simple?
It varies by team and team leader is the short answer. I tend to be more inclusive. There's a lot of people, out of the people that are on our team, I'd say some people do a lot of AI work, some do a little, some want to do work and they want to learn. And we train people and get them involved, and we've done, I think, a pretty good job of getting a lot of people up to speed on it.
What have you learned building the team? What was your expectations when you first started? And I'm sure things didn't go the path that you expected them to along the way. Any good insights to other attorneys who are interested in building a team?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I've built several teams at different law firms. So I've been through some of the school of hard knocks. I really think there's not really a magic formula. I think you need to make it clear what the goals of the team are, and you need people to understand that. And the goals can change over time, but people are going to join a team and you're going to ask them to commit their time. They need to know what they're going to get out of it. And I think you need to deliver on that. That's easier said than done sometimes, but I think it's a system that's, if you like, not necessarily at our firm, maybe at our firm, but like some people have teams. You have a team leader that has a title and they don't do much, right? But they're a king of some kingdom. And I think those teams don't generally tend to succeed. Some firms, some teams will set up meetings and then they cancel a lot of the meetings last minute because someone's too busy. I think you have to have consistency. I think if you are on a team and people start canceling meetings regularly, you're not going to take the meeting seriously and you're going to have low participation. Some of it's just common sense, but I think a lot of it comes to identifying goals for the team, delivering on those goals, and making it inclusive, right? It's not all me teaching people. I learn from people too, right? But it's how do you bring people together in a way that's collaborative, that's beneficial for everybody.
But I guess the ultimate goal, besides the marketing component that we have an AI team of 120 people, is if you bring on a client, it speeds up your process internally of finding the right person. If it's not something that's focused in your area, you already have the team organized around 6 or 7 different areas. It speeds up the process and there's more learning and the more cross shares. Is that the goal? And then gets more billing for those people on the team if they.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. But it's from the perspective, what our ideal goal is to be able to serve any AI need for any client. And so some of it is we have a number of healthcare lawyers who are really steep in AI. We have satellite lawyers that are steep in AI. And so we try to map out looking at our client base, like what are the different areas? And to be honest, there's certain areas where AI is maybe more emerging, but there's other areas where it's been pretty prevalent, like transportation and self-driving cars. And so we try to map out where the needs are, where we see the current needs and where they're going, and make sure we have people who can help clients in those areas. And if we don't, we focus on training and
Got it.
thinking through it. So it's a combination of what you said and really being more proactive in ensuring you have the right skills to be able to serve the client's needs.
On ballpark, let's say an IP practice group, what's the average billable hour for a partner? Is it $1,200 an hour or something like that?
It varies. I don't know. We're probably partners between 1,000 to 2,000 an hour.
Okay. So you had mentioned something else in your interview with Sigal that I really loved. To quote you, or you were sharing about you wish there was a better value proposition. And you gave two examples. One,
I remember this.
It's the example of similar to that, giving a quick answer, right? You have somebody ask your advice or a conversation. You have a couple hours of conversation. That couple hours of conversation can save them millions of dollars based on your advice. But you got maybe $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. On the flip side, there's a lot in litigation or other areas, there's a lot of scheduling and coordination and basic and admin stuff that you're also charging a couple thousand, the same billable rate hour, which doesn't seem efficient. And this maybe was a couple of years ago when you interviewed with Sigal. Have you been thinking more about this better value proposition? Do you see any more light at the end of the tunnel to get us maybe away from some form of the billable hour at large firms or something in addition to?
Yeah. So we do a lot of alternative fees. I think more and more firms are doing alternative fee arrangements. I think there's different ranges of alternative fees, but a lot of them, I'll be honest, I think are still, the starting point is what's our billable hour and how can we structure this in a way that's going to create fairness, right? And so there's certain things, because we've done it so many times, like developing an AI policy, it still needs to be customized, but we're not starting from scratch. We can offer clients a fixed fee for some training, meeting with the AI, helping form and/or meet with their AI governance committee, walking through some questions, and then helping develop and customize a policy. We know what goes into that. It's pretty predictable as long as the client doesn't spin wheels a lot and go through many cycles more than we would anticipate. So we can do some of those on a fixed fee basis, for example.
And how does that happen? Do you propose that to the client originally, or they say, oh, no, we don't want to pay the hourly rate? Is that upfront and transparent?
Well, it's always upfront and transparent, whatever the fee is going to be.
No, of course.
Sometimes it's going to be, sometimes it's the clients that's asking for that.
Got it.
Sometimes they just want to know what's the budget. And based on certain assumptions, we can say, assuming we do X, Y, and Z, we think it's going to be this.
Yeah.
And if they're fine with just an hourly rate and we say it's going to be 20 hours, whatever, then sometimes they're fine with that. Sometimes they want something a little more creative or alternative, as you said.
Of course, being involved in AI and emerging technologies, and also how it's transforming the practice of law, in contract lifecycle, in discovery, in every other area in legal research. Has the moment really arrived where AI and everything associated with that is really helping remove or speed up a lot of the things that took hours of the administrative, even the legal research, even things that were not just administrative, but were needed, even contract review? Are we hitting that moment where we can't bill 10 hours for that work when it really took us 45 minutes through AI and then an hour to review?
So I guess I have two parts to the answer to that question. One is, like, our policy is, regardless of whether you're using AI or anything else, you just bill your actual time for now. We made that a conscious choice. You can't value bill unless you have an agreement with the client to do a fixed fee or something like that we talked about. If you do something that used to take you an hour and you can now do it in 5 minutes because of AI, you bill 5 minutes for that individual task. I do think, though, that will change over time, and I can share some thoughts on that in a second. But I also don't think that AI is at the point right now where in certain areas you get good cost savings. In a lot of places, it's really about better quality, right? So a lot of these grammar editors and things that can help improve writing, it can find inconsistencies and stuff. It's providing a valuable service that might take a proofreader a lot of time to do. At that end, I think the stuff's pretty good right now. But in actually doing legal work, even the research and the writing, it's good. It's gotten to a point where it's good, but I don't think it's anywhere near where it ultimately will be. I think it'll get a lot better over time. And I think two things will happen as a result of that. And it's going to be interesting to see. I think the first thing is that I think most law firms are experimenting, at least to some extent, with AI right now. I think AI is going to become a mandatory tool for law firms. And in part, for two reasons. One is people always joke that AI is not going to replace your job. It's a competitor using AI that's going to replace your job. If everyone else is using it, you have to use it even just to stay in the game. But I think clients, in-house legal departments, they're using it to some extent. Some clients initially was like, don't use generative AI for any of our legal work. That's all going to change as the comfort level and the quality gets better and some of the legal ethical issues which are getting worked out. And I think what's going to be interesting is to see, you flip it around, not from the law firm's perspective, but from the client's perspective. Like, how would you use AI if you were a client? Would you pay a firm to use AI and give them a premium, right? So some of the people think that what's going to happen is law firms, because they're investing a lot in AI, they'll work something out with a client where if something used to take 5 hours and now it's 5 minutes, you can bill us 2.5 hours, right? And everyone wins. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that to a large extent, and for at least some projects, clients will have their own AI tools and they'll do the first 5-minute project, send it out to you and say, hey, review this and give me your thoughts. Take an hour to do it. And so look, not everything is going to be as black and white as that, but I think a lot of in-house legal departments can manage legal spend by doing that. And some are already doing it or talking about doing it.
So do you think there's going to be a big hit at some point to law firms? Or
I think that a couple of things are going to happen. One is there's going to be benefits to law firms as well, because even knowing what to put into AI takes some legal thinking. And if you have a unique set of facts and things like that, and sometimes the clients will know what to do and sometimes they won't. So there'll be certain things where clients can do it themselves because they know the facts as well as we do, because they're the ones dealing with it and they know what they want and they want legal answers. They can get some initial answer out of something and then have a lawyer check it. There's going to be other stuff like litigation strategy and other things. A client's not going to be able to do all that themselves. I think it's not that it's going to necessarily take work away from law firms. I think what it's going to do over time is it's going to increase the premium for real good lawyering, for strategic work, and how do we use AI to supplement that part of it. I think a lot of the basic stuff will be pretty routine, and whether firms do it or clients do some of it, like that's going to be pretty easy. But so I think that the big challenge for law firms is how do you continue to get the high value work that clients can't do and AI can't do, and use AI to assist you in that in a way that's cost effective and good value for the client.
I recently saw Richard Susskind speak at the Legal Tech Fund Summit, and he said essentially what you just said, that the partners who have all the experience, it's actually who help with strategy and other areas, and it's hard to replace that experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the issue. It's the issue within the new associates and the newer associates, where clients are going to say, I am not paying X amount per hour for them to do this. And either they'll do it on their own or something else will be worked out. And so that's what he was saying will be, how are you doing on time? Just to make sure, because I know your time is valuable.
I'm good for a bit. Yes.
Cool. So before I go to, I have a list of, we're going to test something out. I have some fun questions that we're going to end with. But before I go to this, I'm going to start with the same question I started with. Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that, like, through this conversation got your mind thinking like, oh, I want to make sure we cover this in this interview? And if not, that's fine too. But I know you have so much knowledge and information and experience. I love just to see where your head's spinning.
I think just touch on some of the things you talked about, like this, like what can lawyers do, or how can they get into the AI field or do more about it. I think it really comes down to you have to push yourself and you have to get out of your comfort zone. As I said, a lot of lawyers, they do one thing, they do it well, and they do it all their career, and that's great. But when there's new opportunities, there's a lot of older partners that I talk to in our firm and other firms that they don't want to take the time to learn AI. It's like confusing to them, and that's understandable. So I think a couple of things from that. One is, I think the people who spend more time and effort to really understand it and map out the legal issues are the ones that are leading in this industry, in this area. And I think even more importantly, I think for young lawyers, and I do a lot of work with, I've taught law students, I mentor a lot, and people always ask me these questions, what should I do? And I'm like, as a young lawyer, I think the most important thing you can do, you have to learn to be a good lawyer, work at a good firm, whatever you want to do. Pick an area that is going to be your base to focus on, but you have to be willing to push yourself into new areas. And in areas like AI and blockchain, there's not a lot of experts, right? And so if you're willing to take the time, effort to do that, there's a number of young lawyers who have really made a name for themselves in some of these areas because they've just gotten out in front sooner than other people. And this is an area where young lawyers can really excel, not necessarily on their own, but with the help of others. They can be an incredible resource. Whereas if you're trying to be an antitrust lawyer and you're working with a partner who's done it for 30 years, he knows everything, you're never going to catch up. So I think look for opportunities, and these are huge opportunities.
Does Sheppard Mullin have any formal training on AI? And
we do.
What are you doing?
Yes. So we have an internal AI team that sets our policy. We do training. We did summer associate training. We do, through our team, we do training. We have members of the AI team, some of the technology folks train people. We have our GC office. They've done ethics training on use of AI. Yeah, so the short of it is we do a lot of it. It's a part of, and it's not just part of the team, it's part of the firm.
I don't know if you know this because we just launched it and your courses are part of it. We recently launched an AI hub of about 75 hours of CLE courses in different learning paths that attorneys from individual to associate to partner and all the different tracks that they can take. So we're trying to be as serious as we can about it, to give some, not just course here or there, but some real structured learning. And we're thinking about, and I'm like, even if it doesn't, I mean, just putting a little bit of a certification on it, just so someone can have that incentive to go through the path and see what they've done. But our AI learning paths right now are the most complete, not surprisingly, the most completed learning paths on Lawline. So it's exciting to see that people are doing it and they're following through on that.
Yeah, that's great.
You mentioned comfort zone. How does it? That's such a cliche, right? So I wrote a book called The Fast Forward Mindset, and it's about how to get out of your comfort zone. I wrote it in 2019, and probably the number one person I was writing
I didn't know that, so I wasn't setting you up to promote your book in case anyone thinks that.
Don't worry, it's a 5-year-old book. But the reason I say that, it's the most cliche term, right? Get out of your comfort zone. But what can you, like, what did you do? Did you was there a book that resonated with you besides just saying do? Because I find myself so overwhelmed every day. The people I follow and the new things that are happening, there's this part of me inside of me that's just go like this and don't pay attention and it'll be all fine. But then what you said, that's a recipe for disaster in 5 years. But it's not just getting out of your comfort zone, it's understanding where to focus and how to do it.
There is no one manual I can point to. It's really a combination of things. I think that, so just briefly to go back, you covered my background a little bit, but I went right from engineering school. I never worked as an engineer, worked as a patent examiner rather. Went to law school at night, came out, was a patent attorney, and I've continued to do patent work my entire career. But I started looking at some of the partners that I worked for who did not just patents, but they did trademark and copyright as well. I'm like, that's much more interesting to be able to talk to a client about their overall IP portfolio and strategy and do all that work, not just one piece of it. And so I broadened out into IP. Then I started focusing more on, with some real emergence, especially back in the internet days, even a little before that, seeing the whole internet thing. This is not just new technology, it's not just IP work, but there's a whole host of other legal issues, and there weren't a lot of experts on it. I'm like, this is a huge opportunity to become an advisor to companies on internet law, which is what I did. And I went to conferences, I met with experts, I joined bar committees and industry committees to learn what I could from people. I read a lot. I did all the things that we talked about. There's no one silver bullet, but you need to, there's a balance for lawyers in getting out of your comfort zone that I just got to caution on. One is do all the things I just said to learn. Don't try to do things you're not capable of doing. The bar, imposes an ethical obligation to make sure that you understand the technology you're using, right? A number of lawyers have been sanctioned for using AI, not understanding that it made up cases, for example, right? And so there's a balance between getting out of your comfort zone, but doing it in a responsible way. But you just got to blaze your own path. And I wish I had there's nothing that I do that's unique. It's just I do a lot of different things, that all the available tools that lawyers have to learn things, whether it's teaching, taking seminars, going to conferences, all those things, and reading books and podcasts, all of that is part of what, it takes to become an expert in an area.
What is
In
your
addition to
time?
doing the work, of course.
What's your time management strategy for when you do spend time on learning versus lawyering?
It varies by week. So client work comes first, and I try to fit stuff around it. And I do stuff on weekends and nights sometimes. There's a lot of that as well. It's a pretty significant investment, both on the client work side as well as doing the non-billable stuff to learn and build these teams.
If you were to put in an hour to it weekly, how many hours a week do you think you're applying to reading, listening, searching, the learning component of it?
Yeah, I would say I probably do at least 10 hours a week, if not more. Some weeks it's more.
Okay. And do you think mostly in the mornings or not necessarily?
I listen to podcasts and all the books at night sometimes to go to sleep. When I'm out doing walks or runs or stuff, it really varies whenever there's free time.
The thing about AI, though, is you can't just listen to it. You actually have to go in there, roll up your sleeves, and try the prompts, try the different tools. Is this a whole nother level of learning? Does that 10 hours include all the experimentation and trying, or is that just the ingesting information?
It's probably a mix. Most of it is ingesting information. I try a lot of the tools. A lot of them just based on their terms of service and how they're set up. You don't want to use them. So I wouldn't say
Who don't you want to use? Who don't you want to use?
I'd rather not name. It depends on what your goals are, but I can tell you the types of tools you don't want to use. So if you're using a tool that doesn't keep your inputs confidential, you definitely don't want to use those if you're doing anything client related. That's unethical under the bar rules to do. So I think understanding how the tools work, what their terms of service are important. Some of the tools, like, again, maybe not as important for lawyers, but for companies that are creating expressive content that they want copyright protection for, some of the tools you're not going to get copyright protection because if it's AI generated. Some of them have indemnities, some don't. Some you actually indemnify the tool provider if you produce infringing output and they get sued. Right? I wouldn't want to grant an indemnity, would you? Those tools I wouldn't want to use.
Yeah. Wow. You start looking under the hood, to your point, like just the way Fitbit tracks you, it makes me want to take it off my wrist. That's another side. All right, we got a couple minutes left, so I'm gonna look to see some fun questions to see if it comes up with anything, and then appreciate it. And by the way, I went to GW, so I missed DC. I'll be back there in April. I'm part of the YPO. I don't know if you've heard of it. We have our Global Leaders Conference in April in DC, so I'll be good to be back. So
awesome. If you guys need an AI speaker, call.
Oh my God. Do you speak a lot at conferences?
Yeah.
To entrepreneurs as well?
Yeah.
Cool.
A lot. More to entrepreneurs than lawyers. I do both, but I speak a lot to entrepreneurs.
Right. That's a great point. And I will talk to you offline. Okay. If you could, in some of these, if you could try to like not give the cliche answer, of like just whatever, but they are kind of cliche, but we'll see. When in life did you realize you were capable of more than you thought?
Interesting. I would say for me, as far as career-wise, probably in my fourth year, I was bored just doing patent work. And I realized I needed to do something more if I was going to stay in law. And that's when I started really expanding the practice out, as I mentioned earlier.
So you just like, you were bored and you're like, let me try something new. And then it worked. And you're like, okay.
Yes.
Cool. So
well, it didn't just happen, but yeah, it was a start of a process, and I was able to broaden out into the other areas of IP and then more broadly into other just tech law generally.
What is the biggest failure that ended up being the best thing that happened to you?
The biggest failure. I went to a law firm at one point in my career, which was one of the fastest growing technology firms at the time. And it turned out to be a disaster because they ended up closing the office that I went to a few years afterwards. And from the standpoint of career-wise, you could view it as a failure because it didn't work. But I actually learned a lot from that, and both from the standpoint of practicing what to look for in law firms, how law firms should structure things in these growth areas to do so in a way that has sustainability.
Thank you. I'll give you 3 more and then
that's fine. Keep them coming. They're fun.
All right. Okay, cool. Here's another fun one. What is an unconventional idea you believed in before others did?
Blockchain.
So just out of curiosity, this might sound so stupid of a question. Is blockchain still a thing? Because I know it obviously was a way to record transactions in a different way, and it was open and transparent, but it's certainly not talked about since AI is on the scene. And I'm just curious, was it a fad, or is it really becoming fundamental in the way things are in contracts and things like that?
In my opinion, it's definitely not a fad. It's definitely a technology that is still emerging, and I don't see it going away. I think it solves a lot of societal problems. We could have another whole conversation about that
Okay.
with the decentralization and transparency, the lack of need to trust a single institution or entity to validate transactions. You look at even just recently, the current administration is talking about setting up a crypto reserve. So has it gone away? No. Has AI replaced it? No. Is there an interaction between AI and blockchain? 100%. So
Yeah.
a lot of what's happening with AI is these AI agents, and a lot of the agents there's some technologies. One platform is called virtual protocols that basically take AI agents and they create a smart contract around them, and they reside on a blockchain, and they can transact and do different things with other agents as well as other things. So what we're seeing is a convergence of the technologies, and the power of the two is really incredible.
Maybe you could say NFTs were a fad. Is that about?
No, 100%. NFTs are going to be, in my opinion, absolutely ubiquitous at some point down the road. We're seeing what was a fad was that NFTs were associated with these digital art or kind of things that like those like the memes, and those are probably a fad, right? Those are
That's what I
collectibles
meant.
that
Yeah.
kind of come
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
go. But the NFT technology itself, the ability to have a recordation of ownership of some asset associated with the NFT and have that on a transparent blockchain. We're seeing real estate being tokenized. California Department of Motor Vehicles just tokenized 40 million automobile titles. You're seeing it used more in a more ubiquitous way, but it has actual function, right? Not some pump and dump bad schemes with digital art.
Totally. And like even saying tokenized and things like that, it's like when you can say that and people understand that fully, but we'll save that for another conversation. What constraint in your life has actually fueled your creativity?
The fact there's only 24 hours in a day. Yeah, if you really want to do all the things I
Sleep.
talked about, you have to figure out ways to manage all you want to do and do it efficiently. And some of that requires that you be creative in how you do all that.
What's the most important lesson life has taught you?
People are the most important thing, whether it's family, friends, professionally, building networks, surrounding yourself with good people. A lot of what I learn is by being in, whether it's LinkedIn groups or going to conference with other people who are smarter than me and learning from them, being in the dialogue and learning from them, but also giving back and teaching others who are coming up, who want to learn, who view me as more knowledgeable in certain areas than them. But it's all about people. Everything's about people.
One of my favorite quotes is, in 5 years, you're the same person you are today, except for two things: the relationships that you make and what you learn. And me, they're actually interconnected because you learn the best. Like I'm learning from this conversation, and hopefully we're building the beginning of a relationship. Just because hopefully you could tell I'm listening, I care, and you're sharing things. Do you actively focus on relationship building? Because that's something I took for granted for a long time, and that takes a lot of energy too. But it's like hard to do everything.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think I do focus on relationship building, but I say I've evolved how I place my focus. I think that when I was coming up and trying to build a practice and all this, I was trying to build any relationship I could that I thought would help me. And I think that what I've learned over the years, it's not the number of people, it's the quality of the people
Yeah.
and the genuineness of the relationship. And so what I would say is while my network may be bigger, the number of people I maintain active daily or monthly or weekly relationships with is probably less than it was at some point, but those relationships mean more to me. They're genuine. And I got to tell you, I'm incredibly fortunate. A lot of my clients are good friends. Like we do stuff
Yeah.
together, and there's a genuineness there. I care about helping them. They know that I'm invested in them, and we just like being together. And same with some of these groups that I mentioned. Some of these groups, I used to join groups just to get my name out or to do this or that. But I really find there's incredibly fascinating people that I'm genuinely interested in. And we do stuff together. And even when those groups, if they fall apart, I stay in touch with some of the people who I really developed a good relationship with because of the genuineness of it.
Well, that's the thing about groups and all these different areas you're interested in. When you grow up, it's who you live next to. As you get older and you start focusing in different areas, what you focus on attracts others who are focused on the same things. And so that also helps as well in terms of, that's why I'm in YPO, right? Like it's people who are self-selected who want to grow and learn and support each other in that strategy.
I think to your point, I think early on or in many facets of our life, the people we're surrounded by are not our choice for the most part, right? When you go to school, the people are there. You go to college, you have your classmates. When you start working, it's your workmates. But you think about how many people that you spent a lot of time with when you were working together, and then one of you left and you never stayed in touch again. Was that a genuine relationship? It was a situational relationship. But I think the ones that are really enduring are the ones that are, it's fine to meet people through these things where you were put in the same place together. But I think the ones that are enduring are the ones that last after that situational commonality ceases to exist.
Agree completely. And again, it still takes effort and energy to put that forward. So here's the last question is, how committed are you to being great? And what does that mean to you?
I am committed to being what I perceive to be great. And what it means to me is not that people say, hey, Jim's the greatest lawyer. I think that it's important to me a couple of things. One is, most importantly, it's to be able to effectively serve my clients. And that's, as a lawyer, that's the main goal. And for me, secondarily, it's, as far as being a team leader, it's to really build that team and help people on the team build their work in this area and their skills in this area and the knowledge in this area. And I think if I'm successful in doing well with clients and building the team, I think my clients and the firm is happy with me.
When I think about that question for myself, and I don't know how this relates to you, I struggle because you have this vision of where you can be and where you are. And the true question I have for myself, am I willing to make the sacrifices to be great, to get there?
Mm-hmm.
And generally what those sacrifices, and the two things you're fighting generally are laziness and comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And the other real thing is being with family. And for me, one of the sacrifices is generally having to travel more and being away from your kids in pivotal times. And let's leave it on, because this is an important thing. And so I think a lot of people at some point in their life, they start to realize, you know what, that vision or whatever I'm thinking of, I'm not willing to do that. I'd rather be with my kids. I'd rather spend the time there. And do you feel like, does that resonate with you? Do you feel like you're constantly making sacrifices in one area of your life to be great in another area?
I would say earlier in my career, I made more sacrifices. I think now I make more choices that are better life-work balance.
You've earned it.
It's hard to early in your career. And look, there's a lot of the lawyers that are up and coming that they don't want to put in the time and effort that a lot of people of my vintage did to succeed in law firms. And I respect that if that's their choice. It's going to be hard to be very successful in a career if you're not willing to put it in, but it's a choice on what you want to be great at. Do you want to be great at family, or do you want to be great at law, or do you want to try to thread the needle and be great at both, which is really hard. But there's a balance there that you can strike where you can do both, but it does take sacrifices on your part to be effective in those areas.
And to your point, like the AI is going to be part of every law firm in some degree. So everybody is going to have to reinvent and learn something new to keep up and be relevant. So there is this training component and this opportunity, and it's about change management as well. You know what you have to learn, what's there, but can you follow the steps to do that?
Yep. So, and do you want to? Right? As you said, it's both the ability to do it, the drive to do it, and the
partner to AmLaw 100 firm. Maybe you look at your bank account and you look at what you've done. You're like, I don't know. Maybe you don't. But like when you're at the height of your career, I can see it being really hard to stop, but also you're on a treadmill that you might be exhausted too. I don't know. Like I can see that.
You go back to greatness. I mean, some lawyers define their greatness by how big their book of business is, and I don't think that's an important measure to individual compensation and to firms. But I think from the standpoint of greatness, that's not the most important thing. And
Yeah.
definitely later in your career, it's probably even less important. But I don't think that measuring it based on money is really the right metric.
When this will be out in about a month,
Okay.
and I really hope that you share this with your network and with those who you're close with, because it's very valuable, everything you shared. You've really painted a picture of not only what AI is and what's happening, what it's like to be a partner in a firm, and the struggles that you go through. And I think there's a lot to learn from your experience. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule
Well, I
to
enjoyed talking to you.
yeah, I enjoyed it as well. And maybe I will connect with you. If I might be in DC for the Legal Marketing Association conference that same week. I might have some time. If there's time, it would be nice. I'd stop by your office and just say hello in person.
Absolutely. Feel grab a drink,
Never
something,
hurts.
whatever. But yeah, definitely reach out, and if I'm in town and it works, we'd love to do it.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
Have a good day,
Take
James.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.